Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the podcast that takes stacks of information, pulls out the key insights, and basically gives you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we're doing a deep dive into some really fascinating stuff from the May 2025 CA magazine from Super Kalam. It's a look at current affairs, our goal, to help you grasp the big shifts happening in Indian governance, global economics, environmental issues, and some pretty groundbreaking science, too. You should walk away with some surprising facts and hopefully a clearer sense of what really matters.
Absolutely. And what's really striking, I think, is how things that seem totally separate actually link up. They form this larger story about policy, progress, how society is changing. We'll try to connect those dots for you, look at the implications.
Okay, let's get into it then. Our sources point to two pretty major developments in Indian politics. They really highlight this dynamic between the courts and, well, the other parts of government. First up, there's this landmark verdict making digital inclusion essentially a constitutional must-have. The Supreme Court has declared digital access a fundamental right. That's under Article 21 of the Constitution.
Right. Article 21, life and personal liberty, but interpreted broadly.
Exactly. A procedure established by law and all that.
And this fits into a long pattern, doesn't it? Article 21 has been evolving for decades. If you go back, historically, you had cases in the late 70s linking it with other rights, the whole golden triangle idea. Then more recently, the 2017 privacy ruling. The court keeps expanding its scope. It's quite consistent.
And there were specific pointers towards this already, right? Like that 2020 case about internet access being key for free speech.
Precisely. And even earlier, 2019, the Kerala High Court was actually the first to call internet access a fundamental right.
Yeah.
So not entirely out of the blue. But this new verdict, it goes further than just saying everyone gets access. It lays out really specific instructions. Things like making sure digital services are accessible for people with visual or hearing impairments, even for acid attack survivors. It talks about needing accessible formats, braille, audio interfaces for e-governance.
Wow.
And, crucially, telling governments they need specific outreach plans. For rural areas, the elderly, poorer communities, linguistic minorities, persons with disabilities, it's aiming for real inclusion.
That's quite comprehensive. Okay, so while the judiciary is defining rights like this, there's this other really interesting development about the balance of power itself. President Drupadi Murmu has made a reference to the Supreme Court about legislative assent. That's under Article 143(1).
Yes, the advisory jurisdiction. This follows that Supreme Court ruling involving the governor of Tamil Nadu, wasn't it?
That's the one.
Where the court basically said governors can't just sit on state bills forever, no absolute pocket veto. They have to act in a, quote, reasonable time. Usually 1 to 3 months, or just 1 month if a bill's been sent back and repassed.
So the delays were becoming a real issue, undermining the whole legislative process.
Exactly. So now the president's asking the Supreme Court, essentially, for guidance on 14 specific questions.
Like what sort of questions?
Well, things like, can the Supreme Court actually impose these kinds of timelines on the president or governors? Is this idea of deemed assent, where a bill passes automatically after a while, constitutionally okay? And fundamentally, is the judiciary sort of overstepping by setting these rules without the Constitution explicitly saying so?
Sounds like a potential clash.
It's definitely got layers. Article 143 lets the president ask, but the court's opinion isn't strictly binding. The real tension here is, federalism and accountability versus executive privilege and the fact that, well, some bills are just complex and take time.
A delicate balance, as you say.
Very much so. This reference is trying to find where those lines are drawn.
Okay, let's shift gears. From India's internal legal debates to the bigger global picture economics and the environment, we all hear about the push for renewable energy, solar, wind. Sounds great. But our sources flagged, a pretty significant problem highlighted by a recent massive blackout. This was across the Iberian Peninsula in Europe.
Right, Spain and Portugal. And the initial findings are quite telling. They link the blackout to grid instability and the suspected cause, fluctuating power input from renewable sources.
The intermittency problem.
Exactly. That's the core challenge. You get sudden drops, maybe clouds cover a huge solar farm or the wind dies down, or conversely, a big surge. If the grid doesn't have enough storage capacity or, ways to balance these swings out quickly, it can become unstable, like what seems to have happened there.
That's a really critical point, especially for a country like India that's going all in on renewables.
Absolutely. It's a big lesson. You can't just build the wind farms and solar parks. You have to build up the grid's resilience alongside them.
It's the whole system that needs to work reliably, whatever the weather's doing.
Precisely. Smart grids, storage, better forecasting.
Mm-hmm.
It all has to evolve together.
Okay, let's pivot again to international relations. India's been making some interesting strategic moves. Two examples stand out. First, that decision to abstain on the IMF vote for aid to Pakistan.
That was noteworthy. India didn't oppose it, but didn't support it either, just abstained. We're talking about, what, $1 billion under one facility, $1.3 billion under another? Significant sums.
Right. So why abstain?
Well, it seems to signal India's ongoing concerns. Concerns about how Pakistan might use the funds, given its economic track record, and of course the underlying geopolitical friction.
So it sends a message without actually blocking the aid package, kind of maintaining strategic independence.
That seems to be the interpretation, yes. A diplomatic signal.
And the other move, the trade dispute with the U.S.
Ah, yes. India formally told the WTO, the World Trade Organization, that it plans to hit back with retaliatory tariffs on about $7.6 billion worth of U.S. imports.
And this goes back to
the U.S. tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum imposed way back in 2018. And with the WTO's main dispute body, the appellate body, basically non-functional right now.
Right. It's been paralyzed for ages.
Exactly. So countries like India are using the system that's left notifying their intent to retaliate and determining the measures themselves.
So it's India being quite assertive, protecting its trade interests, putting pressure on for some kind of resolution, even if other parts of the U.S.-India relationship are okay.
It shows a more, perhaps, firm and nuanced approach to these specific trade disagreements.
Okay, let's talk about something closer to home for many listeners, our gadgets and the waste they create. E-waste. The numbers are pretty shocking. Between 2017-18 and 2023-24, India's e-waste apparently jumped by over 150%.
Huge increase.
Making India the world's third largest producer. We're talking 1.77 million metric tons. That's a lot of old phones and computers.
It's staggering. And the really worrying part, around 95% of that is handled by informal or unregulated recyclers.
And that means?
Well, it means serious risks, both environmental and for human health. Think open burning, using acid to leach out metals. This releases toxic stuff like lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, nickel. The source mentioned annual economic losses over $10 billion just from the pollution and health impacts. And tragically, it cuts the average lifespan of workers in that informal sector to below 27 years.
27. That's appalling.
It really is. And beyond the human cost, there's the economic waste, too.
Yeah, the source mentioned that. Something like 80,000 crore rupees worth of critical metals just lost.
Forfeited because they aren't recovered properly.
Yeah.
And billions, maybe $20 billion in potential taxes lost because it's all happening off the books.
So what's being done or what's recommended?
Key things are strengthening extended producer responsibility, EPR.
That's where the companies that make the stuff have to pay for or organize the recycling. Right?
Exactly. So making those EPR targets tougher, also building up the formal recycling infrastructure, proper facilities, and of course public awareness campaigns. We all need to know how to dispose of this stuff correctly.
Which ties neatly into this whole right to repair idea that's gaining ground.
It does, perfectly.
Because if you can fix your phone instead of chucking it. So what's the latest on that in India?
Well, the Department of Consumer Affairs has set up a panel. They're developing a repairability index, an RI, starting with smartphones and tablets. It's going to be a score, like 1 to 5.
Based on what?
6 things, weighted. How easy is it to actually take the device apart? Is repair information available? Can you get spare parts? Software updates, what kind of tools do you need? Even the types of screws or fasteners used.
And the companies, the OEMs, they'll have to declare this score.
That's the plan. Self-declare it on the packaging, on product listings online, so you, the consumer, can see before you buy how easy it might be to fix later.
That could be a game changer for consumers, giving us more power.
Definitely. And it's not just the index. Remember, the Right to Repair portal launched back in 2022.
Vaguely, yeah. What does it do?
It gives free access to repair manuals, diagnostic tools, information on spare part prices, and not just for phones. Cars, electronics, home appliances, even farm equipment.
Okay, that's actually huge.
It really supports this shift towards a circular economy, making products last longer, cutting down waste, and like you said, empowering people, giving them more control.
Right. Let's move to our final topic, a really exciting scientific development that could, well, genuinely reshape Indian agriculture. We're talking genome editing. Our sources highlighted 2 new rice varieties, DRR Danhan 100 and Putha DST Rice 1, created using this tech. And importantly, they stressed these aren't your typical GMOs.
Yeah, that distinction is crucial. Genome editing, especially with tools like CRISPR-Cas9, it's incredibly precise. It allows scientists to make very specific, targeted changes to a plant's own DNA, often without inserting any foreign DNA from another species, which is usually what happens in traditional GMOs.
Ah, okay. So it's more like precision surgery on the plant's genes.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. And India's regulations actually recognize this difference. They have categories like SDN1 and SDN2 editing, which face fewer regulatory hurdles, specifically because they don't involve integrating foreign genes. It makes the path from lab to field potentially faster.
Okay, so what's the big deal about these specific rice varieties?
Well, the potential impact is massive. DRR-DN 100, for instance, has shown yield increases up to 35%.
35%. Wow, given that rice yields have kind of plateaued.
Exactly. That could be huge for overall food production.
Right.
And then there's Pusa DST Rice 1. This one's engineered for drought tolerance. It can also grow better in salty or alkaline soils.
Which is vital with climate change and land degradation being major issues right now.
Absolutely vital. Think about climate resilience. These aren't just small tweaks. They address major agricultural challenges.
So zooming out, what does this mean for farmers, for food security?
Potentially lower input costs for farmers, less water needed, maybe fewer chemicals, better incomes hopefully, and greater food security for the country. It's really a move towards precision breeding, tailoring crops to handle specific problems, whether it's climate stress or soil issues. It can really transform things.
So from the high courts and presidential references through global energy grids and trade spats down to the phone in your pocket and the rice on your plate, it's pretty clear there are some major shifts happening all around us.
It really shows how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? Legal decisions, tech breakthroughs, international diplomacy, they all weave together. And these deep dives, hopefully, help make sense of how those constant interactions are shaping the world in ways that, genuinely affect our lives.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today.
It does leave you thinking, though, doesn't it? With this growing focus we see everywhere on national self-reliance, on environmental sustainability, how might that fundamentally reshape global cooperation itself in the next decade? Could we see more localized solutions, perhaps, but still deeply interconnected globally? Something to ponder.